for this Meet CodeX event. This is an event we put on every October, and the purpose of this event is to introduce our center to some of the new students at Stanford Law School or elsewhere at Stanford or anywhere in the world, and to also to anyone who doesn't know our center yet, and also for some of our researchers to introduce their work to you, and then basically you know, invite you all to get involved if any other things that we present to you are intriguing and of interest. So my name is Roland Vogl. I'm Executive Director of CodeX and a lecturer in law at Stanford Law School. And I have the pleasure to you know, set this meeting up. So we have about 1 hour and 15 minutes. The goal is to you know, introduce you to CodeX and then also allow you to ask questions. We have a number of folks who signed up for this. So we switched this meeting into a webinar style meeting. So for you to ask questions, please use the chat function, and then we will direct your questions to the respective speakers. So CodeX is a center at Stanford. We've been around for a good 15 years now, and we're a joint operation by the Stanford Law School and the Stanford Computer Science Department. So I like to use this image here, which is neither the law school nor the computer science department. You know, we are intellectually really sort of placed somewhere in between those two departments. Our mission is legal empowerment through information technology. So we are a research center focused on researching and developing technologies that empower all stakeholders in the legal system. And so access to justice is near and dear to our hearts. We think, you know, great things can happen when technologists and lawyers, you know, think about how to solve the many information problems in the legal system. So we are a research center, but we are also a community of innovators in legal tech, and those can either sit at other academic institutions or in research labs or in startups. And in fact, we have also a fairly active startup community around the center. So many of our fellows, some of who will be speaking to you in just a little bit, have started some of the most innovative startups in the space. And so we are also very proud of the relationships we have with folks who are really driving the legal innovation agenda forward in the trenches of legal tech startups. All right, so I want to just to you know, sort of set this up a little bit, and for those who are kind of new to this space, I want to just talk, you know, maybe 5 to 10 minutes about some of the, you know, the big picture trends we're seeing in the legal tech space. So legal tech is, you know, this is my sort of history of like important technological innovations in the law, you know, all the way going back to West's American Digest system, which, you know, was an important innovation that allowed us to organize and access the relevant case law in a new way. This came about around 1900 or so. Obviously not empowered with computers yet at the time, but, you know, sort of fast forward to the early 70s, you know, we had big mainframe computers, and the first applications of, you know, using computers to do electronic research in law and to create the first expert systems in law. Then in sort of in the, you know, late 1990s, early 2000s, you know, e-discovery technologies, you know, technology-assisted review became more and more important, you know, to go through large amounts of legal information in in lawsuits to find the smoking gun. And this is one of the sort of most developed sub branches in the legal tech industry. It's been around for a while, and sort of the latest kind of cutting edge AI technologies find application in the e-discovery space. Then something like legal process outsourcing is not a technology in itself. It's a kind of a new business model, but it's technologically enabled. And so are the multi-sided platforms that use well-developed technologies to connect stakeholders in the legal system in new ways, attorney marketplaces, that kind of thing. And then alternative legal service providers similarly use sort of existing technologies to change the business in a way that the legal services and legal expertise are made available to clients. And then, a little bit more than 10 years ago, this whole area of big data law was, sort of taking off, using statistical AI methods to do, things like predicting legal outcomes, and all the way up to computational law. And by that, we mean the automation and mechanization of legal analysis. And computational law is really the focus area of our center, although it's not all that we do, but it's really the focus of the center. And computable contracts is an important part of computational law. So operationalizable contracts. A lot of people talk about that in the blockchain context, but it's important far beyond the blockchain. So that's sort of my sort of history of legal tech innovation in just one slide. And so it's been growing in importance, there's a lot of important innovations currently in search, in big data, in computational law, practice management, online dispute resolution, and computational law, as I said, is the focus of our center. And it itself has like these kind of two dimensions to it. So ones are the rules-driven approaches that leverage logic programming and to automate and mechanize legal analysis. And then we have the data-driven approaches, the data-driven computational law approaches. And as I said, rules-driven approaches, they leverage deductive approaches, and the products that these technologies enable are, these kind of expert systems, TurboTax being the most famous, of course, and then the legal chatbots, that allow people to navigate to certain areas of the law and get answers to their questions. And then computable contracts I already mentioned, and the data-driven technologies. They use statistical AI, latest advances in natural language processing, machine learning, neural networks, sort of so-called inductive approaches, AI approaches, to do things like, analyze legal data, to do predictive analytics, e-discovery, or contracts analytics. And so I would say, there's been a lot of talk about the presumed disruption that these AI technologies will bring to the legal profession, and there's been much talk about it, a little bit less in recent years. I think most of the technologies that we see coming out are kind of used to enhance sort of human lawyers rather than replace them. Of course, there are also technologies that are replacing some of the aspects of legal work that used to be handled by legal professionals. And there's a whole debate around, this whole disruption thing. It's just, we don't need to go into this at this point, but it's something I think just to kind of be aware of. Some people also talk about how law school education is potentially getting disrupted through technology. Anyway, so lots of legal tech entrepreneurship. We run a database that Pieter and some law school students created some years ago that track early stage legal tech companies. It's called the CodeX Tech Index, and hopefully, Pieter will give us a little update on that. There's more and more investment in the space, and M&A deals, and we even had an IPO, DocuSign a couple of years ago, which was a successful IPO. So that the whole space is sort of coming into its own, and it's starting to really attract also investment from marquee investors. So there's also this concept of these alternative legal service providers, also a rapidly growing space that in-house corporate law departments are working more and more with alternative legal service providers to get their work done, because they can do so efficiently and at lower rate than with sort of traditional law firms. Even law firms are now trying to embrace and work with some of the alternative legal service providers. All right, just a word about the trends in legal education. I'd like to quote Larry, the late Larry Ripstein, who really put it really well in an article he wrote almost 10 years ago now, where he said, in general, he says that this legal information market creates a new task for legal educators. Instead of just learning how to counsel individuals on their context-specific and idiosyncratic problems, legal experts need to be able to use legal information to design products for general use or for trading capital assets. And so we very much, believe in that vision. I think, that was, really, he was really sort of ahead of his time. Now, many law schools, not just in the US, but around the world, are experimenting with creating new modules that will teach law students the technical skills to be successful in this rapidly changing legal marketplace. And so we strongly feel that every lawyer has to know at least the basics of legal informatics. So we do, in addition to just our research and inviting Stanford students to participate in our research, we also develop a different kind of educational units, including classes. We have a survey class on legal informatics that we taught in the past. We'll likely focus this coming year on just the computational law branch of legal informatics. So hope you check out that class if that is of interest. Then we have different kind of short units that are pop-up classes and boot camps, like the Exponential Innovations in AI Law boot camp, which will run again this January, and our fellow Jay Mandal will tell us a little bit more about that. We had a class on legal and entrepreneurship, and a bunch of different formats in terms of just classes, and but we also have events for the larger community, including our flagship event that's our CodeX Future Law Conference that occurs every April, usually first week of April. And so hopefully you can join us for that. We have a speaker series every month, which you will check out. And we have like 2 great talks already lined up for this year. For the fall, we have Professor Dan Ho and Professor Engstrom join us in the next couple of weeks. And every Thursday, we run a session that currently is completely virtual, but that brings in people who work on exciting research projects or exciting startups to basically pitch the group and get feedback, and they're basically using us as a sounding board and as a friendly community to test out some new ideas. So anyway, so if you want to join us for that, we'd love to have you join us for those meetings. Go on our website and just put your email on our list here, like join upcoming CodeX meetings list, and then you will we will get the announcement for the upcoming group meetings. All right, so with that, that is just my very quick intro. If you already have questions, you please fire away in the chat. But if you don't, I will just turn it over to Leila, who I believe is our next speaker.
Thanks, Roland. Thanks very much. Can everyone hear me all right?
We can hear you well,
good?
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks very much. So I'm actually not going to turn on the video since we had some trouble in the test, but I will share a screen and I'm going to do a demo for everyone. Before I do that, I'll just do a quick intro on Symbium and myself. So my name is Leila Banijamali. I'm one of the co-founders alongside Abhijit Mahapatra and Professor Michael Genezareth, who's at the CS department, and also one of the directors at CodeX. And we met at Stanford through CodeX and through the computer science department, launching our company 2 years ago. And so what do we do? Symbium is the computational law company. Roland had a beautiful description of what computational law is. It's the mechanization of legal analysis. And so our mission today is to empower the public to deal with the regulatory aspects of residential construction. And the infrastructure of our technology and how we apply it is vertical agnostic. But today we're focused on the residential construction and government space, which, by the way, government being the largest industry on the planet and an industry in which I think everyone may already know is an area where there's a significant opportunity for meaningful disruption, particularly when it comes to the user experience of the laws and regulations that we all interact with, perhaps on a daily basis. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive in to the demo. However, before I start a quick interlude, I just want to give a shout out to first Roland and second the CodeX team. CodeX is an incredible organization. People are dialing in or tuning in for the first time. Please do get involved with CodeX, even during their remote sessions during the pandemic. I think it's highly worth your time. The major advantages of being a part of CodeX and contributing in some way is the incredible networking that the organization provides and the group provides, and just contributing to the conversation, the dialogue around computational law, computable contracts, and all these other great topics. So I do have a major shout out to CodeX, and we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for CodeX. So. Great. So with that, this is our app. It's publicly available right now. It's available at build.symbium.com. This is one use case that we're working on. There's other more complicated versions, but we'll start with this. And this allows anyone to understand what's possible on their property with regards to accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. ADUs are simply second units on a property, and it's California's method, and a bunch of other states are also implementing this way to essentially increase their housing capacity in a time where there is a housing crunch and a major need for extra housing. So we're going to go ahead and type in an address here. Going to go with 20 grand in Redwood City. And here we are. Immediately we see an image of our parcel. This is 20 grand in Redwood City. On the left-hand side, we see property overview, some general information about the property. Some of these fields are editable. For example, if your house is not actually 1,700 square feet, if it's 2,000 square feet, you can go ahead and edit that. There's zoning information also as well in another tab that provides you with zoning info for that particular parcel, analyzed against that parcel. Now, here's the cool part. I'm gonna actually go see what's possible with regards to an accessory dwelling unit. So we're gonna click on that. Is there an existing home on this property? We're gonna click on yes, there is. And an accessory dwelling unit should be allowed here. Now, what's interesting here is this is actually analyzing this particular parcel against what the current regulations say about what is and is not allowed on a property. So we're going to go ahead and browse the designs, and we're going to see this in a more visual format. So designs is something that Symbium allowed developers and cities, nonprofits. It allowed architects to upload their designs for accessory dwelling units onto our site. And as we hover over, and you can see it on the left-hand side, as we hover over each of these footprints, you'll see that it's actually dropped on the screen on the parcel to the right. So let's just go ahead and choose one of these footprints. Let's say we like that particular design. It's an odd shape, which is kind of cool. can actually move this around on the property, and you can get instant feedback on what's allowed and why. If there's been a violation, say a setback has been violated, it'll obviously change color, and then you'll see on the right, upper right, there's been an issue, say with separation or otherwise. You can go ahead and spin that around, that design around on your parcel. Let's say you want it to be in that orientation or another orientation. It'll allow you to see what you can and can't do. Okay, so if you want it to be there, that's optimal positioning for it. You'll see on the parcel too, there's a shaded area. That's where the setbacks have already been pre-calculated for you. So these are the setbacks where you cannot build on your property according to these local jurisdictions rules. And on the left-hand side, we can go ahead and scroll to see what the information about this particular design entails. And this is all information around the building area, square footage, interior, exterior finishes, and it essentially takes the homeowner through costs as well, what those costs include or exclude, whether there's financing available, and just to go ahead and contact that developer, the provider, to actually get one built. Now, there's other things, of course, that we can incorporate into this just by way of example. There's fee calculators, cost calculators, all kinds of stuff, which actually we're about to launch pretty soon. Allows you to perform some sketch work. So we can, if we don't like any of those designs, we can go ahead and sketch a size of an ADU that is more preferable, perhaps. It fits better on the parcel. So here we've got a very sort of long-shaped ADU. And then, of course, it's giving us instant analysis, instant legal analysis on the placement and so on. So let's go ahead and click on the development standards. And here, we've generated this report, which will allow a homeowner or an architect or a developer or a city planner to go ahead and understand all of the development standards that apply to this property that have been calculated against the existing conditions and what's permitted with regards to what the law says is allowed. And that includes all the setbacks, whether a parking is required, so on and so forth. And then we have additional information here that would be applicable in this area. For example, if the ADU can be rented, what the restrictions are, if there's fire restrictions as well, other considerations. So that just gives you a quick background on Build, which is a publicly facing tool. The idea here is, and the vision is, again, a mission statement, sorry, not the vision. The mission statement is to empower the public to deal with these regulatory aspects of residential construction. Starting with this use case, obviously there's more use cases and certainly some that are upcoming as well. So go ahead and close this. We're going to go take a look at another tool we call Build Plus. And Build Plus allows anyone on a subscription basis, an enterprise tool, to perform these jurisdiction-wide searches, similar to what you saw, except now it's jurisdiction-wide. So now you want to understand in a city, let's just choose a city, for example, Redwood City. I'm going to create a new project. So here we've lit up a map of Redwood City and all of the parcels. There's a total of 17,443 lots. And then as we go through the filters on the left-hand side, we're going to understand, based on what the regulations are for Redwood City and mathematically what's allowed and what can actually fit on those lots based on the dimensions that we select, where an ADU is actually allowed. And so you'll see the parcel numbers are changing as you're moving the slider. And this is important because it gives planners an idea, it gives developers an idea of ADU capacity in that jurisdiction based on how the regulations are changing in real time. It can inform policy decisions in advance. You can actually see all kinds of other stuff like flood zones, seismic hazard zones, fire hazard zones, distance from transit. You can see charts visually on the right-hand side that'll allow you to understand sort of in a different format what's possible. And then we've got some census data in there as well. So here we're highlighting some various income, median incomes. And then of course, we're going to go ahead and go to the regulations, and we're going to see an example of what happens when we're comparing current regulations against new and upcoming regulations. So we want to see the impact of upcoming regulations on a jurisdiction and how that compares to the current regulations that are in place, specifically an impact on ADU capacity. And then you can apply this across multiple different scenarios, across really any variable you can think of. But again, of course, we're focused on ADUs in this instance. So we've gone ahead and made some changes to filters, and you'll see the new scenarios are the properties that are that brown color, the blue color, and then the darker blue color, the purple color, is the where the laws are overlapping each other and the capacity has not changed. And so you see all the new lots that are qualified under this new law for which we've changed the parameters. So that's the demo of Build Plus. Abhijit, you can go ahead and close the screen if you want. And I'm not sure if we're doing questions or if I should just hand it over to you, Roland.
No, I think you know, folks are gonna write questions in the text, and if you have some time, you could hang around, and we'll try to answer the questions once we went through all the resources. Thank you, Leila. This is great and a wonderful example of a computational law system that this one came out of research here at CodeX, and just a great illustration of how legal information can be built into a system and baked into a system and embedded in a system. Sometimes we call it embedded law, to give you immediate information. And it is a process that would, in the past, would have taken weeks, you know, for you to go to the planning department and get an answer if it's actually in compliance with the law. And so you get an immediate answer there. So this is a real, really great illustration, and I really appreciate
thanks very much
through that.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so next we have Stephen Caines. Stephen is our current residential fellow, and Stephen, are you there?
Yep, right here, Roland.
All right, so over to you, Stephen.
So as Roland said, my name is Stephen Caines, and I am the residential fellow at CodeX, beginning my second year here. Just to echo Leila's sentiment, CodeX really is an amazing community. Whether you're just trying to find kindred spirits that will help you nurture that kind of moonshot or that ambitious goal, or just trying to find actually substantive reviews of your project, I think that CodeX is just a great community for that. So I'm just very happy that I can continue to be a part of it. In general, my work focuses on facial recognition as it's being used by domestic government and law enforcement agency, and I also do some other work in digital privacy. Recently, I was asked to join the San Jose Digital Privacy Advisory Task Force, so I'll be directly advising the city on matters of privacy and technology, which is going to be very exciting and I'm excited for. The project that I'm here to talk to you today about, though, is called Corona Atlas, which is a pandemic relief dashboard, if you will. And so I'm going to start by talking about the pain points of what we're trying to solve with this specific iteration. I'm going to give you a quick demo. I'm going to talk about other applications for the system. And then finally, I'm going to give you what the original vision was and what we would have done if we weren't a little bit resource constrained at the moment. But the 3 pain points that we're trying to solve with this version of Corona Atlas is 1, misinformation. So misinformation, as I'm sure, as we all know, has kind of been rising lately, and specifically within the pandemic, there's kind of a greater onus for people to be able to find credible and authentic sources of information. I think many of us in this group are very fortunate to have the training and education that allows us to navigate the internet and different channels kind of with relative ease, but you know, when you don't have the time and you may not have that similar life experience, it may be difficult to find authentic resources. And then once you throw in things like sponsored and promoted posts, searching kind of a traditional Google search often can be a headache if you don't have those aforementioned skills. At a second level, there's been so much great work done by different institutions and nonprofits throughout the pandemic, but they're all kind of siloed on their own websites. So we're trying to pull it all together in one place. And then the final issue that we're trying to solve for is one of kind of latent issues. So when we say that, we mean to say that individuals may know that they're facing housing instability and they may need to do something about that, but they may not realize that their small business qualifies for a loan that I know, or a grant that's open only for like a 2-week window. So connecting people and making them realize issues that they may be like just under the surface, but they're not actively aware of. That's like another goal of this project. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Awesome. So can you all see Corona Atlas? So the website domain is coronatlas.law.stanford.edu or coronatlas.com, which redirects. And so we're going to start by selecting a state. And so I built this with the help of my really good friend, Daniel Carvajal. So he's also the co-founder of this project. We started this back in March, had a few iterations and pivots, but here we are now. And so this tool is meant for the general public. On the right, you'll see that we're pulling information from a COVID tracking API that updates once a day, just to give you some context. On the left, we scrape some data from the National Governors Association. So if you click on one of these entries, for instance, it'll take you to a news link or a press release or a full document, so you can kind of review it for yourself. And then underneath, we have all these state-specific resources that's meant for the specific jurisdiction that you selected. So for instance, in our health, we have basic health information in the dashboards, but also we have things like the COVID tracking API, which will specifically give you the demographic breakdown of different COVID cases and also deaths and things of that nature. And they also demarcate certain things which may be certain disparities. We have housing resources I mentioned before. So for instance, if you're within the state of California or any other state and also other US territories, we pulled ahead kind of different places that you can find relief specifically. And a lot of my background prior to coming to CodeX was in the public interest space. So I have a great kind of familiarity with some of the needs that arise, especially in times of a pandemic or a crisis like we're currently experiencing. We also have education information, employment resources, and then also elections. So even if you're just trying to register to vote or you're trying to become a poll worker, we went ahead and we pulled all those authentic information. We also have things like such as the Brennan Litigation Center, which is tracking election litigation information, which for sure people are very interested to see how everything plays out rather. We also have business information, like I mentioned before, with the small businesses. We have information for the judiciaries, also family resource. So if you're trying to find, let's say, a food bank, information for aging seniors and also caregivers, if you have someone with special needs or a disabled person in your home. And then also Veterans Affairs. Also, we have immigration information as well and resources. And also things like, let's say, travel and tourism. So next time you're about to board a flight, if you're trying to understand if there are, let's say, travelers due to COVID, or in California, we have wildfires occasionally, understanding and staying appraised so you can make kind of educated decisions as we move through this world is what we're trying to do here. So essentially we built this entire website. It's made up of 2,200 unique links that again are state tailored. And this is kind of the iteration right now. And this tool is really meant for the general public to kind of aid them in navigating this crisis. So I'm going to stop sharing now. To move to where these other kind of applications are, and a great idea for another application would be disaster relief in general. I've been fortunate to live in a lot of different places, so I've been able to experience snowstorms and blizzards in the Northeast, hurricanes in Florida. I've seen tornadoes in the Midwest, and then also now living in California, the fires and the earthquakes as well. And so disaster relief has certain things that are kind of synonymous in multiple experiences, whether it be COVID or something else. So number one, just a constantly and rapidly evolving situation that's database. So instead of imagining the COVID statistics, imagine things like air purity. Second, there's siloed decision making. So things like, let's say, evacuation decisions in terms of natural disaster. Those are often left up to certain local municipalities, but knowing what people are doing around you can help you as an individual kind of make better decisions and act a little bit quicker when things are kind of the time is of the essence. And then also the recovery needs. So we mentioned small businesses, but similarly, whether it's like an evacuation shelter, there's a lot of other information that people will need after the initial disaster has passed. So I'd just like to close on kind of the original vision of CodeX and what I would do if we had kind of a lot more resources. And the original goal was to collect all these legislative orders and be able to kind of compare them and act as a clearinghouse that kind of summarizes some of these findings. So if you imagine 3 phases of functionality, the first basic level was just basic tracking. So do I need a mask if I go to a specific grocery store? Finding out what current orders are active in which jurisdictions, right? Just at a basic level. At a second level, because I've done public interest work, I know a lot of these orders often have disparate impacts on certain communities. So understanding, let's say, if fines have a disparate impact on let's say low-income communities as they appeal to, like, let's say mask orders, for instance. If we had summary legislative analysis, we could demarcate at just a basic level which of these orders have fines and things, so it's easier to navigate. And then at a third grander level, we wanted to be able to essentially do more in-depth analysis of all this legal data. And the goal of that was to be able to allow people from outside of the field of law, so let that be economists, journalists, data scientists, epidemiologists, to better interact with this legal data so they can make their own distinctions and connections between the data and kind of connect, like, what is the best way to construct legislative public health orders. One, so you get compliance, but 2, you also kind of reduce some of those like long-term economic impacts and things of that nature. So the way that we were going to accomplish this, as it is a very kind of ambitious goal, is utilizing the wide network of law students across the US. I have a lot of connections also with programs like the Access to Justice Technology Fellows and different groups. So we're aiming to crowdsource it and then also simultaneously run an NLP algorithm that will simultaneously label the data, and we kind of have a feedback loop of human law students labeling the data, NLP algorithm continuously learning. And so the benefits of being able to have the labeled data, aside from having people from outside the discipline be able to better interact with it, is that we can kind of figure out some of these empirical terms in terms of legislative construction and other things to look out for. So I really believe that even though we all collectively were having this fatigue with the pandemic, I think moving forward, it would be very key to understand what worked, what didn't work. Because even though there was mass chaos in terms of the public health orders and everything being enacted and jurisdictions literally abutting each other, handing things drastically, I think there are a lot of lessons learned, but unless we have some standardization and aggregation of the data, we're going to miss all these lessons. So if we do not kind of take heed and learn from this kind of natural experiment we had with all these public health orders, it'll be harder in the future if we subsequently ever have another pandemic. So I'd just like to advocate again for data standards, one, both in terms of how we present information to the general public, as we have in this current iteration, but then also moving forward in the future, labeling data, understanding nuances, and kind of the longer term impacts of public health orders. That is Corona Atlas in a nutshell.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you so much. And yeah, so we have a number of questions already, and we have 3 more fellows presenting their work, and we have about 40 more minutes. So if I could ask Pieter, Jay, and Reuben to make sure that we have enough time, at least 15 minutes or so, at the end of the session of the hour, to make sure that we address all the different questions. And there are questions for Symbium as well as for Corona Atlas, and I'm sure there will be more coming in. So over to you, Pieter.
Hi everyone. Good afternoon. I'll be keeping it succinct, Roland, so that we stay within time. I believe you should be able to see my screen.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, everyone. So my name is Pieter Gunst. I'm the CEO of Legal.io and a CodeX fellow. I will be presenting today a little bit about one very fascinating and cool project that CodeX is doing, namely the CodeX Tech Index. The CodeX Tech Index is part of my academic work. My main job is also in legal technology as the CEO of Legal.io. And at that company, we are building the world's global enterprise legal marketplace, which essentially to date has meant building a network of over 10,000 legal professionals and matching them to legal work. And we've done that for more than 260,000 matters. And when you think about this, a lot of it is a data problem. And this is one of the things that made me so excited about CodeX when I learned about the center in 2010. Because as Roland mentioned, CodeX is about legal empowerment through information technology. And it's a bunch of people from all kinds of different fields that work together to make the legal system better. And boy, can it be made better. And I highlighted the word transparency here because most of my work and many of the problems I see in the industry are essentially a result of lack of transparency. Whatever you do in legal, it's really hard to make informed decisions because there's simply very little data that helps you drive these decisions. And this was one of the problems that we were thinking about years ago when we started the CodeX Tech Index. The CodeX Tech Index is a website and application that now curates a list of over 1,700 legal technology companies. They're early stage startups and more mature companies that are all represented with a profile in this directory. The application was created at Stanford during a course, Programming for Lawyers, that was organized for the course of 3 years. And the directory launched in 2016. It's one of the earliest legal technology directories to exist, although since then, many, many more of these kind of directories have been created. The dataset is curated by students who help keep listings up to date. The database is continuously growing. It's publicly available, and even the code base is open source. And if you ever get to study it, you will see that it's written by students. So we apologize in advance for any bugs. Now, what do you find in the Tech Index? you find more than 1,700 companies categorized around some basic vectors. It's their name, a description of what they do, categorization and big buckets, tags that give you a more refined view of what these companies do. We look at their location. We look at when these companies were founded. We look at the outcome. Are they still active years later? And then we categorize some information that allow users to do further research, such as the website and other social channels. Now, what's interesting about this data set is that it allows you to get insights about what's happening in the legal technology market, which is fairly nascent over time. When we launched the directory in 2016, we were tracking 633 companies. And since then, year over year, the data set has grown with a big push to add more data and ensure the accuracy of all historical data that happened in this year, with 4 people actually working intensely on further validating the data set and updating it. We have another 200 something companies in our queue that we're looking at. So this data set is alive, breathing, and continuously growing. Now, what's interesting is that it allows you to see these trends in legal technology, which is a field that will reshape how law is practiced in the next decades. And if you look at the data set, for example, here, you see the number of companies that we consider legal technology companies. There's no law firms in there, no service providers, and how they grow over time. And you see this massive peak that's starting to happen, right? Around 2010, 2011, and the growth of this sector as a whole. It's also very interesting to see what companies are doing. For example, in marketplaces connecting consumers and attorneys, or companies and attorneys, are a very big segment. But then others, such as automating document workflows, practice management, really take a big piece of the pie. Outside of knowing what these companies do, we also look at what happens to them. So we track companies over their lifetime. And for the current data set as a whole, we see that 79% of these companies are still active. Sometimes it's maybe slumber active, but they're there. A bit over 17% has died, and 3.4% was acquired and observed by a bigger brand. And the data set as a whole basically allows you to segment all this information across the different areas that these companies operate, and it gives you a sense of what's really happening in the market. The other thing that we look at, of course, is where legal technology companies are being created. And this is a geographic mapping of the data set as it looked this morning. And of course, the US is the largest legal market in the world. We spend $300 billion on lawyers every year, about half of the total amount spent in the world. It's also where most legal tech activity is happening, but it's happening in many other places also, and increasingly so. And that's very cool to see, because the challenges we see here in the legal system that might be addressable through technology are typically very similar in other jurisdictions. One final thing that I wanted to share with you, and this is a project that we are currently also heavily working on, is a new component in the data set. And it's essentially an extension and a refresh of a study that was performed in 2018 by Kristen Sunday. And it was a data-driven analysis of the people behind legal technology companies. Because as you can imagine, given that the legal system serves a wide variety of audiences, it would be interesting to see if the founders behind these companies also represent that same audience. And the short answer is it doesn't, and that's a problem. And so what we've been working on is taking this original data set of about 270 companies and their founders, and we've expanded that data set with 60%, cleaned up the historical data sets, and we'll be releasing a 2020 edition of this study that talks a bit about the people behind these companies rather than just the companies themselves. And we're just very excited about adding that information to our data set. Questions will be handled later, but you can always find me on this email address, peter@legal.io, and on my favorite social network, Twitter, where I am at Digital Lawyer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pieter. Thanks for your overview of the database. And it's it's a project that's been built by the students under Pieter's supervision, and it's a very popular resource in the world of legal tech, and we're very proud of it, and always interested in gaining new insights and what's happening in this marketplace. All right, so thanks, Pieter. Next up is Jay. Jay, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
great.
Over to you.
Wonderful. Hey, thanks again for inviting me to speak, Roland. It's always an honor to be in these events and to be associated with CodeX for many years. This is, for those of you who are not associated with CodeX in the past, this is one of the, I'd argue the most, but one of the most innovative sort of programs at the law school, connecting the intersection of law, computer science, and other schools. And as Roland mentioned, CodeX offers a teaching experiences at the intersection of these schools and provides classes in legal informatics, computational law that are offered by Mike Genesareth and also Roland Vogl. And I'd really encourage you to take a look at this, because we're very lucky at Stanford to have not only one of the top law schools in the nation, but one of the top computer science schools in the nation, which makes our CodeX program very unique in the nation. I've had the privilege to work with Roland the past 4 years in developing classes that are these accelerated pop-up classes for our students. And we're very proud to offer this year the 3rd year of our Exponential Innovations in AI and Law pop-up class. This is a class that'll be open to Stanford students in the areas of law, computer science, and business school. And we've had equal participation from each of those schools. And this class, we think, has been unique for students, I think, because it has 2 distinct parts. One is that it's an accelerated class that teaches students over a course of a week, basically principles in artificial intelligence, law, ethics, and innovation areas. And it also balances with that the ability of these same students to work in small cross-disciplinary teams to develop startup ideas using these principles and pitch to a group of VCs at the end, and maybe even get funded. Hasn't happened yet, but hopefully it will. So on the lesson side, on the lecture side, we have experts in their respective fields teaching the areas of artificial intelligence, computational technologies, in other areas, regulation, law, ethics, and innovation and emerging technologies, identifying and assessing opportunities in AI and computational law. And we also teach product management and design thinking in order to allow students to apply these concepts to develop business ideas. Again, moving to the second half of the class, they apply these concepts in small teams to develop ethical and AI-driven business ideas based on use cases that address, we think, some of the most pressing societal issues of our time. This year, we've chosen the subjects of digital democracy and governance, very timely with the election, racial inequality in policing, education and the digital divide, and environmental protection. So I'll actually jump into to show you a quick visual of our class. I think you should see my screen now. So this is just a few images of the classes. Again, it's a mix of lectures by folks like Roland Vogl, myself, and others, and also some team brainstorming exercises and small group sessions where students work closely together to develop these business ideas. And this is just a quick pick of the class composition from the last class. This also gives, again, a quick summary of some of the main teaching points in our class and some of the lecturers. This year, we'll continue to be the main lecturers and organizers of this class will include Roland Vogl, who's spoken many times today, a Stanford lecturer of law, and a leader actually in the space of computational law technology in our nation, as well as Daniel Lina, who's also a senior lecturer in law at Northwestern Law and Engineering, and Stephen Caines, who you heard earlier today, is a co-organizer of this, as well as myself. And my quick background, I also have been, I'm an SAP product executive and started a company as a CEO as well. So we're excited to have this class offered. We also bring in an additional element of this class is we also bring in speakers from industry to really apply some of the principles we teach in the class as coaches and speakers. So we've had executives from Google, from Apple, from HP and SAP. As an example, a Google executive who's in charge of the task force for ethics and AI came to speak about the challenges that Google faces in developing emerging technologies and the ethical issues that they face. So this has some of the basics about the class. And the last point I'd like to make is that at CodeX, we really are trying to push the envelope, myself and many others amongst the fellows, on experimenting with new teaching techniques. So this follows the belief that we believe that instead of using the Socratic method, that we want to have experiential classes for our students, where students not only learn new principles, but also apply them in not only in amongst law students, but in a cross-disciplinary sort of environment where they can collaborate and develop ideas, and in our case, pitch them in front of VCs to see if their ideas actually stick. So those are some of the concepts that we teach in terms of the principles and also the teaching methodology. I don't know if we can switch Roland to Stephen, who could share a little more details about how to sign up and some more details about the class. But it'd be great if I could hand the baton to Stephen Caines to talk a little bit more about the class.
Yeah, so thank you for that setup, Jay, and describing the class thoroughly. It's going to be offered in winter quarter this year, most likely the second or third week of January. We're still trying to figure out exact details. It won't be in the course catalog, so make sure that you sign up for our CodeX announcements so you can be appraised, and follow us on social media too, where we will announce when the course opens up. It's open to students in law school, School of Engineering, and then also graduate business school, and we will also consider undergraduate applicants. If any of the aforementioned topics that Jay mentioned kind of spark your knowledge, or you have any good readings to suggest, please forward them to us at ailawbootcamp@gmail.com, and we'll try to include that information in the course itself. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Roland.
All right, thank you, Jay, and thank you, Stephen. And so, yeah, both Jay and Stephen have been really driving, this class and other pop-up classes we have, and they are by all means a really amazing educational experience. I mean, they're really drawing on their own expertise, but they know also who are the people in industry who are really at the cutting edge of some of those issues, and they bring them in, and the students can actually work with those folks on very specific problems. So yeah, check it out. We'd love to have you at this class. And yeah, last but not least, I want to turn it over to Reuben. Reuben, are you there?
Yes, hi. Thank you, Roland.
All right, over to you, Reuben.
All right, so I'll just share my screen here. And hopefully you can see it.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
So hi, everyone. My name is Reuben Youngblom, and I am a fellow here at CodeX. And in addition to my own fellow projects, I'm also a member of the CodeX blockchain group. So I'm here today to speak a little bit about the blockchain group and talk about what we've been up to and what we do. So the group is a collective of blockchain academics and professionals and enthusiasts. And while we are housed at Stanford Law School, we're really a global organization, and we have members from all around the world. So I think most people are familiar with blockchain through Bitcoin, but just in case, an extremely kind of reductive definition of what blockchain is it can be thought of as a digital ledger that has certain properties. It's open, it's censor resistant, it's tamper proof, and in a Bitcoin context, this ledger is used to store account information. So that's things like the balance, where Bitcoins are coming from, where they're going to. And what I really like about this quote is that it takes that definition and that notion of blockchain, and it really expands on it when it says that blockchains can be programmed to record not just financial transactions, but virtually everything of value. So more recently, this, quote, everything of value has been expanded to include computer code. So instead of storing financial information and account information, we can store things like the state of an application. We can store even the source code that runs the application. And it's no longer absurd to think about some blockchains as essentially being decentralized computers. So from a legal perspective, this is absolutely fascinating, right? So when we think about some of the words that people use to describe Bitcoin, people say it's anonymous, it's permissionless, it's immutable, and things get really interesting when you apply that to code, right? So just as sort of a case in point, one thing we've seen in other government regimes around the world is that they have taken active efforts to suppress things like social media. And not to pick on Twitter or anything, but Twitter, as an example, is pretty easy to shut down by a government. You can shut it down at the ISP level. Twitter can do, and sometimes does, their own internal censoring. They can make a deal with the government because they're a single actor with a single point of failure and sort of single pressure points. So what this does when you suppress social media, it has the effect of chilling things like organization, it chills dissent, it chills the transfer of information, and ultimately chills free speech. So in light of this, it's extremely powerful to think about a computer application that has some of these blockchain adjectives applied to it. So an application that is open and permissionless, or an application that is censor resistant, or tamper-proof, or anonymous. So blockchain gives rise to all of these legal challenges and a lot more. I spoke a little bit about how this idea of immutable money, censor-proof money, or censor-proof code and applications, obviously this poses huge challenges for regulators. An additional challenge is also that this space is evolving so quickly that the technology is doing a lot to outpace the regulation. It's causing a lot of complexity in the space, a lot of confusion, and out of this complexity has sort of grown this CodeX blockchain group around the need for bringing some clarity to what's happening in blockchain. So our motivations for forming this group were threefold, although they're all sort of underpinned by something that Jay actually touched on earlier, which is that CodeX is an extremely unique center that sits right in the middle of an extremely unique law school and university, which itself is in the middle of an extremely unique industrial landscape. So I don't think it's hyperbole to say that there's nowhere else in the world where you can step out of the office of one of the brightest legal minds in the world and walk 3 minutes over to Gates, to the computer science building, and talk to some of the brightest computer science professors in the world, some of whom have done foundational research on the cryptography that secures blockchain, or in some cases have actually written the consensus protocols, and then walk a couple more minutes and bump into some of the brightest venture capitalists in the world and some of the most influential tech founders on the planet, just all in one small area. So this is extremely unique, and we think that this places CodeX to be extremely well positioned to help Stanford and the Stanford community, and also the rest of the world, if we include regulators and policymakers and governments, to really understand blockchain and understand how it fits in. There really is no more appropriate home for an academic blockchain group than at CodeX. And it just happens to be really synergistic with everything that CodeX is and does already. We're able to leverage the existing CodeX work and existing CodeX expertise to help us as a group understand blockchain even better. So out of these motivations have come our mandate, our group mandate, and that is to research and publish informed perspectives on blockchain and the blockchain industry, while we offer policy guidance to regulators, policymakers, and governance. And possibly most importantly, part of our mandate is neutrality and inclusivity. There are a lot of motivations in the blockchain space. There's obviously the financial motivation. There's huge incentives for mis and disinformation in blockchain, and we try very hard to just be as unbiased as possible, and as neutral as possible, and as open and transparent as a group as we can possibly be. It's almost impossible to narrow our kind of specific focus down into a couple of bullet points. Here I've listed legal issues, smart contracts and governance, and use cases. And I think this covers some of it, but I think probably the better way to think about it is to imagine that we take the blockchain ecosystem and start with some of the legal concerns and then move outward from there. And we really touch on almost every aspect of blockchain at this point. So our MO, and this is my just quick pitch on the how and why to get involved if this is something you're interested in. We have monthly meetings. They are the first Thursdays of the month from 2:45 to 4 Pacific time. Currently they are virtual because of COVID. When things start to open back up again, we do have on-campus meetings, but for now, if you are interested in joining, you can go to law.stanford.edu/codex/blockchain. And that will take you to our group page. And there's a little email mailing list sign up there, and you'll be able to get the meeting link and news and updates about our group. And the last thing I want to touch on is the group and fellow initiatives that have come out of the blockchain group. We're definitely a very active organization in terms of empowering our members to start new initiatives and also having group initiatives that we all collectively sort of help on. So one of our big ones is the Stanford Journal of Blockchain Law and Policy, which was the first academic journal to focus on the blockchain space and the larger blockchain ecosystem, and has now grown into an extremely influential voice in the space. We have 5 issues so far. I think the last issue came out this summer, and we are hard at work on the 6th issue. So that's something to look forward to. All of our issues are both in print and online, so it's completely open. If anybody wants to go check that out, it's a really good primer into the legal issues that are facing the blockchain space and that are currently happening at the moment. I am personally very involved in the RegTracks initiative, which is a regulatory tracking initiative. I spoke a little bit about the regulatory challenges that come out of blockchain and all of the global and open nature of this space. And what that has sort of meant functionally is that the regulation is very disjointed, it's very fragmented, and it's very unclear. It's really tough to go now onto the internet and find the information that you need to make informed decisions about what regulation applies to any given jurisdiction. So with RegTracks, we're trying to track all of this information, organize it, analyze it, and then put it into an open repository in order to make it usable. We also have a little conference series called Earth 2030, where we touch on blockchain topics ranging from DAOs to ethics to stablecoins and central bank digital currencies. We've had a couple so far, and we have another one that is sort of tentatively planned for this January or February. So it's something else to look forward to. I mentioned briefly that our individual fellows have initiatives as well, and they span, almost every aspect of tech and blockchain. I think Pieter is in charge of legal.io. A blockchain group member named Tony Lai is also a big part of that. We have a climate data policy initiative, and I'll just quickly highlight the Our Data podcast just because it's easily available on iTunes, and we're sort of constantly pumping out content through that channel. Our next episode will be coming out next week, I believe, and that's with Simon Zadek. He's with the UN Task Force on Digital Financing of the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is sort of just scratching the surface as far as what we do as a group. And we're always looking for new voices, new opinions. And so with that, I will leave my contact information here. I would encourage anybody who is interested in this to get involved. My email is up there, I'll also put it in the chat. Tony and Kush are our co-chairs, and Stephen Nam is the managing editor of the Stanford Journal of Blockchain Law and Policy.
All right, Reuben, thank you so much for that great overview of our blockchain activities. All right, so let's turn to the questions that folks shared in the chat. So the first one, perhaps, Reuben, is one for you. From Jefferson, who's asking, to what extent have you had exchanges or discussions with OpenLaw, a consensus Ethereum project to create blockchain legal contracts via legal assembly wizards? So I will just say one thing. So we've had a lot of conversations around computational contracts. It's a focus area for our center. We're about to delve into an even deeper research project in this space. So we've been very much talking to folks in the blockchain world, the Court project and other places. But anything on open law specifically, Reuben, did you want to?
So nothing specifically around open law that we do as a group. Although one thing that I had sort of flashed briefly in the presentation but didn't specifically touch on is that we do have a lot of connections through our members, through academia and at places like Consensus. So we definitely have inroads into Consensus and their open law project, but we don't have anything specific set up right now.
Okay, cool. So the next couple of questions, I think I can take quickly. So one's from Marnie, who's asking, can you speak about UPL, unauthorized practice of law in the legal tech space? UPL is what we call in the tech space, one of the gatekeeping regulations that that have arguably sort of held up some innovation in the space. Unauthorized practice of law is basically a rule that requires that only human lawyers can give legal advice. This is a huge topic. We can, this would be could fill a whole conference, a whole day on that. But, the line runs, if you're providing legal advice, only human lawyers can do that to date. And if you provide legal information, you can have systems provide legal information. There's some innovation that some states are creating sort of regulatory sandboxes like Utah and Arizona. I think it's in talks that talks about doing that in California too, that will loosen some of those rules under, oversight of sort of an oversight unit to allow for some experimentation and allow for new kind of business models to provide some services that may have maybe previously not been allowed under the regulatory regimes. But it's an ongoing issue, and I think there is, it's been a continuous topic in the space. I think there's some sign that some regulators are sort of relaxing some of the rules to provide for some more innovation, to ultimately provide for more access to justice. Because a lot of people don't have access to justice because they can't afford a lawyer, or they don't know that they have a legal issue. So Paul's asking if CodeX advises the government and the legislator on computable law and improving access to justice. We've done some projects with the government, one specifically with a Veterans Administration, helping them, created a system for them. We're always interested in using computational law and legal innovation to improve and facilitate interactions between the individuals and the government. So sort of citizen to government relations, and we've hosted a bunch of different events, and if there are any specific opportunities, Paul, then I'd be happy to talk about what we could do. Then let's see. So Miriam saying to Leila, that she came across a startup in the Founders Institute that's creating something kind of similar for construction, etc. They call Property Atlas. Anatoly is saying very, very cool. This is also with regard to Leila's presentation. He's worked in design and build shop back in the day, and this would have been so great for architects and design build shops, custom home builders and renovators and so on. Also, Mark, I think very much enjoyed Leila's presentation. I think it's so cool. And Marnie's asking, Leila, what's the process of extracting the data from the source data? Leila, are you there? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, sure. So so basically, so first of all, the source data. I think there was another question around that. So I'm trying to kind of answer both questions in one. Where do we get the data from? How do we get that? And it's an interesting one. That the data we're using is primarily publicly available data. The types of work that we're doing has to do with basically taking laws and regulations, and laws and regulations are available to the public. That's how the public knows what am I supposed to comply with or not comply with, or what am I required to do, or what must I abstain from. And so all of that stuff is available to the public in some form. Now, unfortunately, those laws and regulations may not necessarily be in digital form. So the hard part is actually taking those laws and regulations and turning them into from a non-digital form. Maybe it's a textbook, maybe it's map books, which a lot of cities still maintain, surprisingly, and taking those and digitizing them. And that's where the hard work comes in. And there is manual work involved oftentimes in these situations. And that work is important and needs to be done. So again, I'm mentioning this because it's an opportunity for those who are listening, especially as students, if they wanted to, tackle some of these problems of digitization of these types of things, there is an opportunity there. So, basically there is a manual process involved in it. I know it's some machine learning or perhaps some kind of, sort of some scanning technologies. Those are automated. That's not what we're focused on. We're doing a lot of manual coding work. And so, it does require some manual extraction, encoding the laws, creating some kind of standardization around them so that we can apply them across jurisdictions, and then basically digitizing it. So hope that helps.
Thanks, Leila. And I think that also answered Lyubomir's question on where to get the data for Symbium. Bruce is saying, have you thought about using Symbium in rebuilding wildfire destroyed regions like Paradise? And how the regulations analyzed? So that's going a little bit further. This is Maya's asking that question. How are the regulations analyzed? Not just how do you get the data? How do you analyze? How do you basically, I guess, build the legal logic into the system?
Yeah.
Is there a word about that?
That's a great question. Yeah, for sure. So actually, I answered, Bruce actually sent me a text message during this, with that question. So I answered it for Bruce, but I will say that we are working with specific jurisdictions on addressing some of these issues and basically just getting the word out there. We actually are launching a statewide tool that will allow counties that have been fire ravaged or have undergone, some sort of tragedy of that sort at scale across their properties, to perform these types of analysis, or at least allowing their homeowners to do that. So that's going to be launched at the end of this month. That map that I showed you only includes 9 jurisdictions at the moment, but as of the end of the next month, Symbium build will be statewide. So with regards to the question around how do we analyze it, currently there's a 2-step process. We do, first of all, we have people with domain knowledge on staff who have been in the residential construction space, who have been in the planning space, and as architects working in the space, to basically help us filter through these regulations. What do they mean, and how might we encode them correctly? And then the second step to that is obviously basically using logic programming to basically encode those sort of streamlined, normalized regulatory filters that the planners and architects and our team has applied internally to make sure that they're surfaced correctly. But yeah, it's a combination of domain knowledge and coding. Thank you,
Leila. All right, so Jeff is asking, and this is with regard to Corona Atlas, I suppose, if you're aware of the efforts of consolidating COVID-19 data at data.world, which includes Johns Hopkins and New York Times, and it's an RDF knowledge graph. Are you aware of that, Stephen?
So thank you for that suggestion, Jefferson. I wasn't aware of data.world, but I was aware of independently Johns Hopkins and those other places. I would say that a lot of the other data sets focus on strictly health metrics. And even though other places may track, like, let's say how many stay-at-home orders there are, the nuance and the details that can later transform those legal orders into almost like a computable format, that does not yet exist from everything that I've seen. So we want to shift from kind of a solely health focus to also getting into greater detail with the legal data. But thank you for your suggestion.
Okay, so let's see. Okay, let me see one of the next questions. For Pieter from Marty, what is the main reason startups fail or become non-active? What are the greatest resistant factors contributing to legal tech failures?
I'll answer it with the other question as to why we're seeing a decrease in legal tech companies being founded in the latest years. What you're seeing is the signs of an early but maturing market. If you're looking at the amount of money that's being invested in legal tech companies and the amount of acquisitions, that's actually picking up. But it's harder now to start a new legal tech company, for example, a contract management company, because now there's a lot of very well-funded ones. That's also one of the primary barriers to getting a company off the ground. It's getting the capital to do it and also finding a market that will sustain the company over time. Especially if you're looking at access to justice issues, many of these issues are very much worth solving. It's just very hard to build a sustainable organization that can keep good people on payroll to consistently solve it. So I think that financing and just product market fit are the main causes of debt of some of these companies you're seeing.
Mm-hmm. Another question from Matthew. Why do you always pitch to VCs? Do you ever do design challenges for purpose of pitching to law firms? If they're good, people would be interested. There are a lot of problems to solve out there that don't need a new piece of software. I think that's a fair point. And many of the challenges I think that we have in the law in the legal profession are, challenges of the business model and processes, and not so much don't require a whole new software. We haven't done any we don't do pitching events to VCs nor to law firms. We haven't done that in the past. And I think, we always are interested in talking and having folks from the law firms involved in helping us understand the challenges they're facing, and giving us ideas for new projects. And so happy to talk to you, Matthew. If you have if you're interested, please let's connect. Dana's asking a question about Symbium. Can you talk about how you ensure your data sources are fresh? I know that can be delays with public records, and state and local regulations can be highly variable in terms of format and where they're published.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the best way to do that across any sector, not just in the government, is to build relationships with people that are managing that data as well. So that's one way we can do it. There's some great partnerships we have with cities that will help us to ensure that we're not just, that the data is not just accurate, but also that we are mirroring the processes that make sense for that particular city. Now, there's another approach as well, which is, the homeowners should have an opportunity to change and update that data. And that's why we were demoing that feature on Build, to allow homeowners to actually correct that data on the spot if they notice that their house is not in fact 1,700 square feet, but in fact 2,000 square feet. That should be able to be done on the spot. And so for the purposes of performing that legal analysis, even though it's not a global save when any user makes that edit, it's good enough for the person who's trying to understand the picture of their property and what can be done.
Thanks, Leila. So we're already 3 minutes over our time, but maybe let's see if there's maybe one more question we can. All right, so yeah, just good comments from folks like, Shugam, who's a data scientist in India and wants to delve into legal informatics. And there's great work happening in India and too. And there's just a prize that's going to be awarded in the near future to the top innovations in India. And I'm honored to be part of that jury. Happy to talk to you, Shugam, if you want to shoot me an email. Let's see. Daniel is saying, what projects are you currently doing in relation with Tim Berners-Lee linked data concept? I don't think any. I'm not quite sure I know enough about that project. Let's see. Alicia is asking Reuben, you mentioned that talks about the digital financing is coming up. Where can we sign up for that event and talk?
Yeah, so I saw that comment and I apologize if I was unclear. The digital financing was a podcast episode that we have coming out hopefully next week through the Our Data podcast. Although we, as part of the Earth 2030 conference series, we will most likely have a panel on digital financing when we run that event in the spring.
Mm-hmm. And then Vasu is asking if CodeX is working on any initiatives related to tax law. Not currently, not anything specific to tax law at the moment. And then Jefferson's asking about the immutability of blockchain. What are the techniques that you see that allow the modification of contract while preserving the history of events since the original agreement, on-chain or off? Reuben, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting and complicated question. So a lot of it depends on what exactly is your conceptualization of the history of events, right? Because to some extent, it's impossible to get rid of the history of events. But mostly what I see people doing is using proxy contracts. So I guess to answer your question more specifically, that's structurally an on-chain solution, but that doesn't preclude an off-chain component in the way that any contract might use an off-chain component, just any kind of layer 2 or a scaling solution. Right.
Cool, thanks. And Marnie actually responded to a question about tax law. That's true. So there's a Blue Jay Legal, which is a Toronto University spin-off that's run by a tax law professor there, Banijamali. He's actually just written a chapter for a book we're bringing out soon on big data law, and so that would be a good person to talk about technological innovation in the tax law space. But yeah, I think so. We have 7 minutes over now, and I'll put my email into the chat too. So if you want to reach out and follow up with me, please reach out. I'm also, maybe Susan, you can put yours in too. Susan's the assistant director of CodeX and the program in law, science, and technology. So if anyone of you has any follow-up questions, any ideas for good projects or presentations or people we should invite, let us know. If you have more questions on how to get involved, please follow up with us. Thank you to all of you for joining us for this. I prefer to do this in a live session, and hopefully next time it's going to be live, where we can have some lunch together, and this way, we're basically intruding on your own lunch break, and really appreciate you sharing your time with us. I know there's lots of interesting things going on out there. I hope you look at CodeX as an interesting place where you can learn interesting things and connect with interesting people who can help you with your ideas to innovate in the legal space. Again, thank you for all your time. Thank you to all our speakers, our fellows, for all the great work you're doing, for taking the time to share it with folks on this call today. And I look forward to being in touch with all of you. All right, thank you all. Take care and stay safe.